Okay, guys, we're going to do adding and subtracting rational expressions. This is day one. We're going to do some more tomorrow. Adding and subtracting is a little bit different than multiplying and dividing. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, guys, we're going to add rational numbers, but before we can do it with variables, we have to remember how to add fractions. You can't just add across the top and bottom. That's not going to be 9 over 15. We have to get a common denominator first. So I'm going to look at my denominators and say what number can I make both of those go into? Well, I noticed that 3 can go into 12. So I'm just going to multiply the left side by 4. And if I do it to the bottom, I have to do it to the top. Okay? So I'm going to end up having 8 over 12 plus 7 over 12. Now that I have common denominators, I'm just going to add my tops. 8 plus 7, which is 15. All that over 12. And then remember, we have to reduce. Well, 15 over 12 is going to be 5 over 4. Okay, now let's look at some examples. Now, here's the basic steps for adding and subtracting. It's a little bit different than multiplying and dividing. For multiplying and dividing, we had to factor it first or take a GCF out first. That's not what we're necessarily going to do for these ones. For these, what we have to do first is get a common denominator. Okay, then we're going to combine like terms on the numerator, and if we can at the very end, that's when we'll simplify. Okay, so there's not really a ton of crossing off when we do adding and subtracting. It's just really if you can at the end. Let's go ahead and look at an example. Okay, guys, so for this one, we're going to have to find a common denominator. If I look at 6 and 4, I got to think of a number that both of those numbers can go into. Kind of a helpful tip is take your biggest number and just start listing out numbers, multiples of that. So I have 6, 12, 18. Now we're looking for a number the smallest number that 4 can go into. Well, 4 can't go into 6, but it can go into 12. So 12 is going to be our common denominator. So I'm going to have to go ahead and multiply the bottom by what to get 12? That's going to be 2. Okay, so 6 times 2 gives me 12. If I do it to the bottom, I have to do it to the top. We're going to multiply that whole thing by that. Okay, and then now 4 times what gives me 12? That's 3. That's 3. So we're going to have 6x plus 2, if I multiply the top out, over 12, plus 3x over 12. Now that I have common denominators, I can just add my tops. So essentially I have 6x plus 2 plus 3x. All over 12. Now we can just combine our like terms. Well, 6x plus 3x is 9x plus 2 all over 12. And the last step is we just got to see if we can simplify it. Okay, so taking out GCFs and then crossing things off if we can. If I look, 9 and 2, nothing goes into both of those, so I can't really cross anything off. We can't cross off the 2 and the 12 because it's 9x plus 2 is a package deal up there. So that's my final answer. Okay, guys. So first off, let's go ahead and get our common denominator for this one. We know it's a subtraction problem, and we'll deal with that in a little bit. But let's go ahead and look at our common denominator. So 9, 18. Oh, well, there it is right there. 6 can go into 18, so I'm going to use 18. So 6 times 3 is going to give me 18. If I do it to the bottom, got to do it to the top. Remember, we're doing it to the whole thing on the numerator. Okay, 9 times 2 gives me 18. So I'm going to do that to the top as well, times the top numerator by 2. Now make sure that we distribute here. It's going to be 15x plus 3 over 3, or sorry, not 3, over 18. Okay. And then minus, I have 4x plus 12 over 18. Now we have common denominators, so we're going to combine like terms. Now here's where this gets kind of tricky. Okay, we have to make sure that we give this subtraction sign to both of those. So I don't really like dealing with subtraction, so I'm going to turn it into addition. And if I do that, I have to give that negative to the ones behind it. So it's going to become a negative 4x and a negative 12. So it's going to change the signs to both of these numerators on the right side. Okay, now we can go ahead and combine like terms. I have a 15x minus 4x, which is going to be 11x. Okay, and I have 3 minus 12, or plus negative 12, which is going to give me a negative 9. Okay? All that is going to be over that denominator, which is 18. If I look at it, there's no number that goes in 11 and 9, so I can't simplify that any further, so I am done. Alright guys, so for this one, it's kind of similar, except now it has x's. Well, we're going to take the same steps, except we're going to have to do something after we get our numbers. Let's do the number part first, though. So I have 10, 20. Oh, there it is at 20, because 4, 5, and 10 can all go into 20. So 4 I have to multiply by 5. Okay. 10 I have to multiply by 2. And 5 I have to multiply by 4. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. Okay. Now, once I do that, okay, now let's look at the variables. I want my variables to match. Well, my highest number is 3. Okay, so I'm going to have to give these ones some more x's, the middle one and the right one. So the middle one needs 2 more x's, so I'm going to have to multiply by x squared. And the right one needs 1 more x to get cubed, so I'm going to have to do the top by 1 more x. So let's multiply these out. I have 5x squared plus 15x all over 20x cubed. Okay, plus, I forgot to give this one an x squared, but it's going to be 4x squared all over 20x cubed. Okay, and then the last one is going to be plus 4x squared plus 20x all over 20x cubed. Now let's go ahead and combine our like terms. I have 5x squared plus 4x squared plus 4x squared, which is going to give me a grand total of 13x squared. And then I have 15x plus 20x, which is going to give me positive 35x. Okay, all of that is going to be over 20x cubed. Now, we're almost done. The last step I need to do is check to see if there's anything that we can simplify. Well, right away I noticed that there's an x in both of those. So I can actually factor an x out. So I'm going to have x, and then I'll be left with 13x plus 35. All of that over 20x cubed. Now the fact that I took an x out, we can actually cancel this x out with one of those x's. So we're then left with x squared on the bottom. So let's go ahead and rewrite our answer, okay, after we simplified it. So it's 13x plus 35. All of that over 20x squared. And that's my final answer. And notice my answers, we usually don't have to simplify, but every once in a while we'll have to simplify it. Just like with our fractions. Let's go on to the next example. Alright, let's look at this one. If you notice, we have x plus 1 plus 2x minus 3 over 3x. This one seems kind of tough at first, but remember, I can just put this all over 1, okay? Now I just say, okay, I need to have my denominators match. Well, I can just multiply this bottom one by 3x, and then I have to multiply the top by 3x. Okay, so now let's make sure we distribute all the way through. So we're going to have 3x squared plus 3x all over 3x plus 2x minus 3 all over 3x. Now let's combine our like terms. I just have 3x squared plus 5x minus 3 all over 3x. And can't take a GCF out the top, so there's my final answer. Alright, this last one, we're going to kind of pre-teach into what we're going to do tomorrow, because we're going to kind of up our game a little bit tomorrow with these type of problems. But if you notice, these are like package deals down here. Okay, so I want them to match. So in order for me to have the common denominator match, I have to kind of think, what am I missing? Well, I'm missing an x minus 1 down here. Okay, and on this side, I'm missing in x plus 3. Okay, so in order for me to have my common denominator is just going to be x plus 3, x minus 1. Okay, so, but if I multiply it to the bottom, I have to multiply it to the top. Okay, so the top is going to be x minus 1, and I'm going to write it over here as an x plus 3 for my 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and multiply these out. This is going to be 2x plus 6 over x plus 3, x minus 1, then minus 4x squared minus 4x all over x plus 3, x minus 1. Okay, now remember what I talked about with that subtraction. We don't really like to deal with subtraction, so let's make that a addition. If I do that, I need to give the negative to the 2 behind it. So that's going to become a negative 4x squared plus 4x. Now let's go ahead and combine like terms. We're going to have a negative 4x squared plus 6x plus 6. All of that over that same denominator, x plus 3, x minus 1. Okay, and then that's our final answer right there. All right, this last one just is explain the differences between the process of multiplying and dividing and adding and subtracting. Kind of if we think about it, multiplying and dividing, we had to factor everything first, and then we try to cross things off or simplify our fractions. When we added and subtracted, we had to find our common denominator first. So that's kind of some differences that we had to do. Go ahead and write these down in your own words, and go ahead and start the practice problems.